Hi everyone. So I'd like to start this video by saying this. Trust your instincts and take care of yourself. The world can be a strange and unpredictable place, and sometimes unsettling things happen that we can't explain or control. The stories you're about to hear are accounts from real people, retold to remind you of the importance of staying aware and cautious. These events are rare, but they leave a lasting mark on those who experience them. And of course, thank you for watching. Been a fan of the channel for some time now. Love how you bring your stories to life. So, I've got a story I think would fit nicely with your content. It happened to me and my friends during what was supposed to be a fun and relaxing weekend. My friends and I had been planning this trip for weeks, 4 of us, escaping the stress for a relaxing getaway. Found an Airbnb, which was perfect. A house just far enough to feel private, with a grill on the patio, a good-sized jacuzzi, and no cleaning fees or hidden charges. Most places on the app nickel and dime you with fees, but this one was a definite keeper. The house was just as advertised, modern and spacious. The patio was set up with string lights, and the jacuzzi clean, just needed to fill up with water. A welcome note stuck on the TV screen included Wi-Fi details and some quirky house rules. Most of them were standard. Take out the trash, no loud music after 9 p.m. But one stood out. Keep all curtains closed after dark. It was odd, but we shrugged it off. After unpacking, we went grocery shopping. The place didn't come with a stocked fridge, so we loaded up on essentials and headed back. As we put the groceries away, I noticed that one of the kitchen cabinets seemed deeper than it should have been, like there was space behind it. I mentioned it to the others, but no one thought much of it. The first night was great. We grilled steaks, used the jacuzzi, and had some soju late into the evening. The house felt relaxing even if it was eerily quiet outside. No traffic, no neighbors, just silence. The next morning, I woke up to find one of the blinds in the living room slightly open. I was sure I'd closed it the night before, but maybe I'd missed it. The others brushed it off, saying it was probably just loose or had shifted overnight. We spent the afternoon in the jacuzzi, laughing and sharing stories. As the sun set, we decided to watch a movie. The rental had a stack of DVDs, so we flipped through them, landing on an old rom-com. When we opened the case, though, it wasn't the movie we expected. Instead, the disc was labeled in Sharpie, Guest Footage 2023. We thought it was just some kind of prank. Curiosity got the better of us, and we popped it into the DVD player. The footage started with the house. It was shaky, like someone had filmed it on a hidden camera. We saw the living room, the jacuzzi, and then the bathroom. The camera was positioned above the shower, angled perfectly to capture anyone inside. My stomach dropped. We sat in stunned silence as the video cut to different clips of previous guests, completely unaware. "Oh my God," one of my friends whispered. "Are there cameras here now?" We scrambled to search the house. We were able to find 2, but clearly there were more as the video had other locations. We just couldn't pinpoint where they're hidden. One was in the bathroom, hidden behind a loose tile above the shower head. Another in the living room. Each was discreet, easy to miss, unless you knew exactly where to look. There wasn't anything hidden in that cabinet in the kitchen. The thought of how many people had been recorded, or what someone had seen of us, was unbearable. We immediately messaged the host demanding an explanation. Their response was chilling in its nonchalance. "The cameras are for security purposes only. Nothing personal is recorded." That was it. No apology, no further explanation. We didn't stick around to argue. By the time the police arrived, we had already packed our things. The officers confirmed the cameras were active and took statements from all of us. They promised to contact Airbnb and the host, but their reassurance did little to calm our nerves. Even after leaving, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. None of us have rented through Airbnb since, and I can't say I'll ever feel comfortable in a rental again. The thought of someone out there, watching those videos, possibly sharing them, haunts me more than I can explain. It's been more than a decade since Typhoon Yolanda, Haiyan, as the rest of the world called it, tore through the Philippines. Back then, we joked about how we always seemed to claim every typhoon as our own, slapping them with Filipino names. But Yolanda was a sick joke, one that left over 6,000 deaths and countless others displaced, compared to the lives lost. My story feels small, almost selfish to tell, but losing Tala, the one bit of light I had in that dark time, still haunts me. Tala wasn't just a dog. She was my anchor when the world around me fell apart. She was my only constant in the chaos. And then, just like that, she was gone. We'd been evacuated to the gymnasium in town. It was the only structure strong enough to withstand Yolanda's fury, or so the officials hoped. Hundreds of us were crammed inside, our tents pitched in rows on the gym's slippery concrete floor. The air was a mix of desperation thick enough to choke on. My tent was in the far corner, close to the gym's back exit. A poor spot, really, since the wind howled through the cracks in the doors, making the tarps overhead shudder and flap like they might fly away at any moment. I left Tala in the tent, curled up on the thin blanket we shared. It took nearly 2 hours to get the rations. I kept glancing back toward the tent, the uneasy feeling in my chest growing. The people around me were quiet, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. When I finally returned, the gym was dim. The single emergency light overhead flickered weakly. I called her as I ducked into the tent. She always came bounding up, wagging her tail. But this time, nothing. I dropped the ration bag and crawled inside. She was lying down unnaturally still. My heart sank as I reached out, praying she was just asleep. But her body was cold. I found a deep cut at her side, just above her ribs. Someone had killed her. The gym seemed to tilt as I stumbled outside, cradling Tala's lifeless body. I called out, desperate to know if anyone had seen anything. Most wouldn't even look at me, though a young boy hesitated and pointed toward the back exit. The overwhelmed security team, busy managing the chaos, could only offer grim acknowledgement, explaining there was nothing they could do amidst the desperation. I spent the night wide awake, leaning against the cold concrete wall of the gym. She didn't deserve to die, and I'll never forget the loss. But what haunts me most is knowing that, even in the darkest times, some people make the darkness deeper. The worst storms don't always come from the sky. This happened a few years ago when I was babysitting for a family I'd worked for a lot. Let's call them the Garcias. They run a catering business, and their house is massive. Honestly, more of a warehouse than a home. The kitchen and storage areas take up most of the first floor, with shelves of supplies, coolers, and food stacked everywhere. During busy seasons, it's chaos down there, with employees, deliveries, and clients constantly coming and going. But the second floor, the living quarters, is strictly off limits to anyone who doesn't live there. It's like a little sanctuary away from the chaos downstairs. The Garcias trusted me to watch their 2-year-old, Sophia, during the holiday rush. They'd done this plenty of times before, and nothing weird ever happened, till this night. The evening started off like usual, and by 8:30, she was out cold in her crib. I settled on the couch upstairs in the living room, scrolling through my phone while keeping an ear on the baby monitor. The house was quiet, which was a relief after all the commotion earlier. About an hour later, I heard what sounded like faint footsteps upstairs. It wasn't loud, just a couple of creaks down the hallway. I told myself it was probably nothing, but I still got up to check on Sophia. Her door was shut, and when I peeked in, she was still sound asleep, hugging her stuffed bunny. I figured I was just being paranoid and went back to the couch. At 10:15, Sophia's voice came through the baby monitor. I could hear her laughing. I went to her room, and when I opened the door, she was sitting up in her crib, smiling. "What's so funny?" I asked. "The lady," she said, pointing toward the balcony door. I froze. The door was locked and the curtains were drawn. "There's no one there, sweetie," I said, trying to sound calm. "She's gone now," Sophia said, lying back down and pulling her blanket up to her chin. I checked the lock on the balcony door twice before leaving her room. I told myself it was just her imagination. Kids say weird stuff, right? But I couldn't shake the unease that was crawling up my spine. At 11, there was a loud knock at the front door downstairs. No one was supposed to be there. The employees and deliveries were done for the day. I crept downstairs and peeked through the glass panel next to the door. A woman was standing on the porch, her face partially hidden by the porch light. She didn't move, just stood there, staring at the door. "Can I help you?" I called out. She didn't respond. Slowly, she raised her hand, and in it, She was holding Sophia's stuffed bunny. I didn't wait. I ran back upstairs, locked myself in Sophia's room, and sat on the floor. I thought about calling the Garcias, but I was terrified of making noise. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally worked up the courage to check, she was gone. When they got home, just after midnight, I didn't tell them anything at first. I thought maybe I'd imagined it all. But the next morning, Mrs. Garcia asked me if I'd noticed anything strange or saw anyone go inside. Apparently, when they reviewed the security cameras, they saw someone break in. Some of their supplies were missing. I told her I hadn't seen anything, but the truth is I can't stop thinking about it. How did that woman get in? How did she get Sophia's bunny? And why didn't she try to hurt us? Years later, I triple-check every lock before going to bed because no matter how safe you think you are, you never really know who's out there. They never hired me again. I'm writing this because I need to get it out, but I can't tell you the name of the group. If you know, you know. If you don't, then be glad you never had to experience it. Saying too much could put me or my family back in danger. These people don't forget. I grew up in the Philippines in a family that was deeply religious. Our church wasn't just a Sunday thing. It was everything. Prayer meetings, Bible studies, mandatory worship services, 3 times a week, minimum. We were told salvation depended on our obedience to the church and its leaders. For years, I believed it. I believed them. But everything changed when I turned 19. One of the senior pastors, a man my family trusted completely, started paying me unwanted attention. It began with little things, compliments that felt too personal, a hand on my shoulder that lingered too long. At first, I told myself I was overreacting, but it escalated. He started calling me into private meetings, asking questions about my personal life that had nothing to do with church. One night, he cornered me after a prayer meeting. He made it clear what he wanted, though he tried to frame it as if I should feel privileged. I felt sick. I wanted to tell my parents, but I was terrified they wouldn't believe me. Or worse, that they would believe me and still do nothing. When I told my mama, she believed me. But when she tried to bring it up to the church leadership, they turned on us instantly. They accused me of lying, of trying to smear the name of a holy man. Soon, it wasn't just about me. They said my family's loyalty was in question. We were excommunicated within a week. At first, we thought that was the end of it. But leaving wasn't enough for them. They wanted to make an example of us. It started small. People from the church spreading rumors about us in our neighborhood, claiming that I was seducing the pastor. Then came the anonymous text messages telling us to repent or face God's judgment. My younger siblings were bullied in school by kids from church families. One night, 2 men from the church showed up at our door. My father answered, and they told him that we had a spiritual debt to pay and demanded we come to a meeting. He refused, slamming the door in their faces, but we could hear them pacing outside for nearly an hour before they finally left. Things only got worse. My parents started noticing the same car parked near our house for hours at a time. We'd see men standing on the street corner watching our house but pretending not to. And one night they came and forced me into their van. They took me to a house and sat me down and lectured me for hours. They said I needed to confess my sins and beg for forgiveness. They said my family's suffering was my fault. I was terrified. All I could think about was whether they were going to let me go. He dumped me 2 days later a few blocks from home, but not before warning me to stay silent and stop spreading lies. My family took me in their arms that night, and my father swore we'd leave for good. A month later, we moved from Davao to Manila. It was the only way we could start over, far away from the eyes that always seemed to be watching us. Years later, I still get nervous when I see a car idling on the street or hear someone walking too close behind me. I don't go to church anymore, not because I don't believe in God, but because I can't trust people who claim to speak for Him. If you've ever been in a group like this, then you know what I mean. They control you with fear, with guilt, with promises of salvation that are just a leash around your neck. And when you try to break free, they don't let you go quietly. This happened when I was 12, and it's one of those memories that sticks with you no matter how much time passes. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing ever really happened. Parents let their kids walk everywhere, and nobody thought twice about it. That day changed everything for me. It was spring and my mom had sent me out to run some errands. Just a couple grocery items. It wasn't far, maybe a 10-minute walk each way. I remember feeling pretty grown up about it at the time. I mean, it was just a quick trip, right? What could go wrong? About halfway back to the house, I noticed a car driving behind me. It was a silver Toyota Corolla, one of those older models from the early 2000s. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe they were looking for an address or waiting to pick someone up. But they kept following me. The car was matching my pace. I sped up a little, hoping they'd just drive past, but they didn't. My stomach started to twist and told myself I was overreacting. But when they pulled over ahead of me, I got really worried. The passenger window rolled down, and a guy leaned out. He said my mom asked him to bring me home. That's when my heart dropped. There was no way that was true. My mom would never. I clutched the grocery bag tighter and kept walking, moving away from the road. My house wasn't far, but it felt like miles. That's when I ran. I dropped all pretense of staying calm and just sprinted as fast as I could. Behind me, I heard the car rev up, and for a moment, I thought they were going to chase me. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. I cut through a backyard and kept running, not even bothering to look back. By the time I made it to my house, I was out of breath and shaking. I burst through the door, yelling for my mom. She took one look at me and knew something was wrong. She called the police. I gave them a description of the car and the guy, and they said they'd patrol the area to look for him. I didn't sleep much that night, terrified that the car would come back. A couple of weeks later, my mom told me the police had caught someone. Apparently, he and another guy had been driving around the area trying to lure kids into their car. A neighbor had spotted the silver Corolla parked suspiciously and called it in. The police arrested the driver, but his accomplice got away. If there's one thing I learned that day, it's to always trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, don't ignore it. Run, get somewhere safe. You don't owe anyone politeness when your safety is at stake. Urban exploring is one of those hobbies that's equal parts thrilling and stupid. My friend Eric and I got into it back in high school when we found an old barn outside of town. It was run down, filled with broken tools and busted furniture, but that little adrenaline rush from sneaking around made it addictive. Since then, we've checked out abandoned motels, a defunct movie theater, and even an old water treatment plant. We're careful though, mostly. We know the risks. Sometimes the terrain is dangerous, floors can give out, and there's always the fear of breathing in something nasty like mold. And yeah, every so often you hear about someone running into a squatter who's not too happy about company. We didn't think about any of that when we found the factory. It was an old textile mill, long abandoned, and we stumbled on it during a late-night drive. The building was massive, 4 stories tall with broken windows and rusted metal beams. It looked like it hadn't seen life in decades. Naturally, Eric wanted to check it out immediately, but I convinced him to wait until the next day. Broad daylight felt safer, or at least less stupid. The next afternoon, we packed our usual gear. Flashlights, masks, gloves, and a couple of granola bars in case we got hungry. The factory was off a dirt road with no signs or fences, so we figured no one would care if we poked around. The front entrance was chained shut, but there was a busted window around the side that gave us easy access. The first thing that hit me when we climbed in was the smell: stale air, mildew, and something sharp, like rust and decay. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the boarded-up windows, creating beams of light that cut through the dust floating in the air. The main floor was huge, filled with old machinery covered in grime and cobwebs. Eric was like a kid in a candy store, snapping pictures of everything while I just tried not to trip over loose wires and debris. We wandered through the main floor for a while, finding random things like an old lunchbox, a broken radio, and a ton of faded newspapers. Nothing exciting. Then we found the stairs. Eric gestured toward the stairs with a grin, eager to explore the second floor. I hesitated, eyeing the rusted metal steps and missing railing, but they seemed sturdy enough. Reluctantly, I followed. The second floor was darker, the boarded-up windows letting in only slivers of light, and the air felt heavier. Offices lined the hallway, their desks and filing cabinets stripped bare by time. As we walked, an unsettling feeling crept over me, like we were intruding where we didn't belong. A soft, shuffling sound came from above. We froze, listening. It stopped. leaving an eerie silence that felt louder than the noise. Eric pressed on confidently, but my nerves were already fraying. We found what looked like a break room and began poking around. The sound came again, louder this time. A scraping, like metal dragging across the floor back near the stairs. My stomach tightened as I turned toward the noise. Eric moved toward the source while I hesitated, torn between curiosity and the instinct to leave. Near the staircase, a shadow appeared, stretched and distorted in the dim light, moving deliberately upward. My heart raced as I caught a glimpse of a man, dirty, wild-eyed, gripping something that looked like a crowbar. Without hesitation, I grabbed Eric, pulling him back down the hallway toward the window we'd entered through. Heavy, erratic footsteps pounded behind us, and the metallic clanging of the crowbar echoed as he chased us. I didn't dare look back. We reached the window, and Eric scrambled out first. I dove through right after him, landing hard on the dirt outside. When I turned to look, the man stood in the window, glaring with an almost animalistic rage. He slammed the crowbar against the frame, the metallic crash reverberating through the stillness. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys, and it took several tries before I managed to start the engine. Even as we sped away, Eric was too shaken to speak, his nervous laughter breaking the silence only once. That day taught us a hard lesson. Urban exploring is something we still enjoy, but we've learned to take precautions, pepper spray, alarms, something to protect ourselves. Some places are abandoned for a reason, and while we might visit them again, we'll never go unprepared. The dark hides dangers we often overlook. Click the next video for more stories, and remember, stay safe and always be aware.